In every age, people have asked the same questions. What is the good life? How should we treat one another? What does it mean to be free or virtuous or just? What does it mean to be human? Western Moral Philosophy for Beginners and Selenius Media takes you on a guided journey through the minds that shaped the moral backbone of the West, from the earliest Greek thinkers to the modern age. Lived stories of struggle, ambition, conflict, revelation, all unfolding against the sweep of history. If you've ever wanted to understand philosophy clearly, calmly, and humanly, if you want to know not just what these thinkers argued, but why it mattered, follow Western Moral Philosophy for Beginners today and explore 10 more podcasts at Selenius Media. Anselm of Canterbury, an influential theologian and philosopher of the 11th century, is best known for his unique synthesis of Christian thought with philosophical inquiry. Operating in a time marked by the maturing of scholasticism, Anselm's intellectual pursuits sought to explore and understand the nature of God, faith, and reason. His compelling arguments and writings continue to invite reflection and debate in moral philosophy centuries later. Anselm is particularly recognized for his ontological argument for the existence of God, an idea that has echoed through the ages and sparked extensive discussion among philosophers and theologians. His famous definition of God as that than which nothing greater can be conceived establishes a foundational understanding of God not merely as a being among beings, but as the greatest conceivable being. This insight sets the stage for his moral philosophy, where Anselm attempts to articulate the nature of good, evil, and the moral obligations of individuals as rational creatures created by a supremely good deity. In his seminal work, The Proslogion, Anselm elaborates on his ontological argument, both providing a lens through which we might view God's existence and showcasing how this existence influences moral reasoning. In this dialogue, he asserts that believing in God is rational because the very concept of God implies that God must exist in reality. For existence in reality is greater than existence merely in the understanding. This argument underscores the idea that faith and reason are not at odds, but can instead coexist harmoniously. Moving beyond the existence of God, Anselm's moral philosophy also emphasizes the need for a proper understanding of goodness. He posits that since God is the ultimate source of goodness, moral principles are grounded in God's nature. This presents a form of moral realism, where moral truths exist independently of human opinion, but are discovered through a relationship with God. Anselm contends that moral obligations arise from our rational understanding of the divine will, leading to the conclusion that we should act in ways that align with this ultimate goodness. One of Anselm's most notable contributions to moral thought is encapsulated in his response to the problem of evil. In addressing this complex issue, he argues that evil is not a substance or being, but a privation of good, a concept that resonates throughout Christian moral philosophy. This perspective implies that morality is not merely about adhering to rules or laws. It's fundamentally about recognizing and affirming the goodness that emanates from God. By understanding evil in this light, Anselm invites a deeper exploration of moral responsibility. If we are created in the image of a supremely good God, we are called to pursue goodness, and in doing so, reflect the divine nature in our moral choices. As we navigate through contemporary dilemmas, Anselm's moral ideas find resonance in various modern contexts. In politics, for instance, the discourse surrounding the moral legitimacy of governance often harkens back to Anselm's conception of the good and the divine command. The notion of a government's moral obligations can be seen as a reflection of a higher ethical standard that promotes the flourishing of human life, reminiscent of Anselm's idea that humans have a duty to pursue a good aligned with divine will. In the realm of medicine, the ethical debates surrounding life, death, and the sanctity of human life echo Anselm's understanding of goodness. When medical professionals face decisions about life-sustaining treatments or end-of-life care, they often grapple with understanding the moral weight of their decisions. Anselm's framework encourages individuals to reflect on the divine nature of dignity and life, urging medical practitioners to align their choices with the fundamental good rather than purely utilitarian calculations. The rise of technology and artificial intelligence also presents practical applications for Anselm's moral philosophy. As we develop algorithms that impact decision-making, from job automation to law enforcement, we find ourselves in ethical quandaries that force us to consider what constitutes good decision-making in technological contexts. Anselm's articulation of goodness as inseparable from the divine call to rational moral behavior invites us to infuse ethical considerations based on human dignity, rather than efficiency or profit maximization, into our technological advancements. However, Anselm's perspective is not without its criticisms. One significant critique is the assertion that his argument tends to conflate existence with necessity. Critics argue that just because we can conceive of the greatest being does not mean that such a being must exist in reality. This line of thinking introduces a debate pioneered by philosophers like Immanuel Kant, who argued that existence is not a predicate. Kant's critiques raised significant challenges for Anselm's ontological framework, suggesting that belief in God must stem from empirical evidence as well as rationalization of the divine. Additionally, Anselm's reliance on a non-material source of morality led to accusations of moral absolutism. Scholars argue that morality derives meaning in a complex world with numerous cultural interpretations and human experiences. This perspective is illustrated through Nietzsche's declaration that God is dead, positing a world where moral values can derive from various human experiences rather than a singular divine command. Furthermore, later thinkers like Karl Marx and existentialists have challenged the implications of Anselm's moral philosophy, advocating for subjective moral frameworks shaped by societal and individual needs. Despite these criticisms, Anselm's ideas helped shape a pivotal moment in the history of moral philosophy that resonates through subsequent thinkers. For instance, Thomas Aquinas built upon Anselm's foundation, integrating Aristotelian philosophy with Christian theology. Aquinas extended the conversation around natural law and virtue ethics, suggesting that moral truths are accessible through human reason as well as divine revelation, a notion that remains relevant in contemporary ethics. Connecting Anselm to modern moral philosophy also points us toward figures like John Stuart Mill, who emphasized utilitarianism as a guide for moral action based on the greatest happiness principle. Here, one might see a contrast with Anselm's focus on divine goodness and moral obligation derived from God's nature. However, both discourse communities seek to establish frameworks for understanding the good, whether in light of divine presence or human experience, illuminating the ongoing dialogue within moral philosophy. As we reflect on Anselm's contributions to moral thought, we might consider how his assertion of rational belief intertwines with ethical action in our daily lives. Are our moral choices influenced by a deeper understanding of good? How do we confront the complexities of our existence, perhaps facing dilemmas where the right choice is blurred by circumstance? Anselm urges us to pursue goodness through a lens that acknowledges the divine, yet challenges us to uphold ethical standards grounded in rationality. His thoughts remain a powerful invitation to examine not only the nature of morality, but our responsibility to navigate the intricate weave of faith and reason in living ethically. In a world where moral clarity can often feel obscured, Anselm's wisdom beckons us to seek a higher understanding of good in our choices and actions, asking us to consider how we, too, might reflect the nature of the divine in the moral landscape of our own lives. Engaging with Anselm of Canterbury's moral philosophy prompts us to ponder not only the nature of good and evil, but also our ethical responsibilities toward one another as rational beings created in the image of a perfect God. To delve deeper into the implications of Anselm's thoughts, we must examine how his theological concepts challenge us to integrate our beliefs into everyday ethical conduct. At the forefront of Anselm's moral inquiry lies the distinction he draws between the nature of goodness and the human experience of justice. He presents goodness as an absolute, immutable quality inherently tied to God's nature, which evokes a moral standard that transcends human opinions and societal norms. For Anselm, to be good is to represent God's attributes as the ultimate source and definition of moral values. This outlook invites individuals to understand their own moral responsibilities as deriving not merely from social conventions or personal impressions, but from an intrinsic relationship with the divine, the one supreme good. Anselm's idea prompts the question, how do we reconcile personal moral choices with this ultimate standard of goodness? In practical terms, consider the ethical dilemmas faced by individuals in the realm of environmental stewardship. As concerns about climate change grow, many find themselves grappling with the morality of their consumption habits and the reach of their actions into future generations. Should one prioritize personal convenience or align their choices with what could be seen as a greater moral imperative, a duty to uphold the dignity of creation as reflective of God's goodness? In this light, Anselm's framework encourages us to view our environmental responsibilities through a lens that recognizes our actions not just as individual choices, but as moral commitments rooted in divine intention. This requires a profound self-reflection regarding the broader consequences of our consumption patterns. Anselm's emphasis on a rational pursuit of good can still resonate today, urging us to act responsibly within the environments we inhabit and fostering a collective responsibility toward the stewardship of the world God created. Another contemporary arena in which Anselm's thoughts can be unpacked is within the justice system. When evaluating the concepts of justice and punishment, his understanding of good as intimately linked to the divine serves to illuminate arguments around moral and ethical considerations in legal contexts. The often recurring debate about mercy versus justice aligns with Anselm's reflections on humanity's relationship with the divine. If God is the ultimate source of goodness that demands justice, yet also extends mercy, how should human institutions navigate the chasm between these two ethical imperatives? In the framework of the justice system, one might consider the significant implications of Anselm's philosophy on capital punishment. Those advocating for its elimination might invoke Anselm's understanding of divine goodness to argue that a true reflection of moral goodness should lean toward rehabilitation rather than retribution. In contrast, prevailing views that emphasize punitive measures may reveal a disconnection from Anselm's vision of good, highlighting instead a human inclination toward vengeance that contradicts the character of a perfect deity. This discussion illustrates the profound ways Anselm's thought calls us closer to reimagining justice as an expression of divine goodness, calling human institutions to reflect that nature in their operations. Throughout his explorations, Anselm also addresses the question of human motivation for moral action. In his writings, he conveys that true goodness and moral action stem from a desire for alignment with the divine will, rather than mere compliance with onerous rules. This motivational aspect raises an invaluable point about the nature of virtue and the role of intention in moral philosophy. Anselm invites us to scrutinize our motivations, challenging the idea that moral action can be a box to tick off. Instead, the essence of goodness in Anselm's thought invites a more profound engagement with the ultimate good, an authentic desire to reflect divine nature in one's actions. Consider the ramifications of this philosophically rich understanding of motivation in professions such as social work or healthcare. Workers in these fields often encounter burnout and moral fatigue when confronted with systemic inequities and overwhelming patient needs. Anselm's insights could serve as a guiding light amid these challenges. He emphasizes that moral actions should be driven by a sincere attachment to goodness, reflecting the nature of God, rather than merely performing duties out of obligation. Social workers and healthcare professionals may find a renewed sense of purpose in viewing their roles as extensions of divine love, finding enrichment in their work by understanding their actions as embodying a higher standard of moral accountability. As we contemplate these applications of Anselmian philosophy, it is crucial to acknowledge that several modern critiques challenge his theological construct. For example, the question of whether daily moral choices should be contingent upon an absolute divine goodness can provoke significant resistance in contemporary ethical discussions. In pluralistic societies, where individuals often hold vastly differing beliefs about morality, the assertion of a singular divine command may risk alienating those who adhere to alternative ethical frameworks rooted in humanistic or empirical evidence. This challenge underscores a tension that persists in moral philosophy, the intersection of universal moral principles versus culturally specific moral beliefs. In this dynamic discourse, we witness the emergence of thinkers who argue for moral relativism, suggesting that individual cultures can define their own ethical norms based on lived experiences rather than a universal, divine command. Scholars like Alistair MacIntyre converge on this standpoint, illustrating a belief that moral narratives are often contingent on historical context, social engagements, and community understandings rather than anchored in an overarching theological framework. Anselm's emphasis on an immutable goodness stemming from God stands in contrast to these views, pushing the dialogue forward about how morality can be conceived and upheld in a diverse and evolving world. Yet, in recognizing such critiques, we must also appreciate how later figures like G.E. Moore and his principle of the naturalistic fallacy also emerged in dialogue with Anselm's moral ideas. Moore emphasizes that praiseworthiness cannot simply be reduced to natural properties. He argues for an understanding of good that defies easy classification, asserting instead that we must identify and analyze our understanding of good through a more nuanced lens, one that acknowledges both qualitative dimensions and our lived experiences. This perspective gives reason to affirm that goodness may, indeed, evade stringent definitions rooted firmly in singular divine command, further polarizing the conversation about how to approach moral reasoning today. In considering these competing views, it is essential to reflect upon how Anselm's thoughts continue to resonate in ongoing moral philosophy debates. Anselm's legacy, his intertwining of divine goodness with moral obligation, provides an enriching, albeit challenging, perspective that invites us to wrestle with our ethical beliefs. He encourages us to engage in the pursuit of goodness in a manner that balances reason with spirituality, while also necessitating that we grapple with the evolving nature of moral truth against the backdrop of varying ethical paradigms. This culminating discussion invites us to return to our own lives and choices. How do Anselm's insights inform our moral frameworks? As we navigate the complexities of our contemporary existence, it prompts us to ponder the role of intention and the definition of good as we confront ethical dilemmas. How do we aspire toward goodness in our actions? And how does our belief in a higher ethical standard shape our decisions in personal and societal contexts? Thus, Anselm of Canterbury remains a pivotal figure in Western moral philosophy, urging us to seek an understanding of morality that is deeply intertwined with a broader conception of divine goodness. His philosophical inquiries prompt vital reflections on what it means to act ethically in a world that often presents moral ambiguity, guiding us toward a path where the pursuit of goodness becomes a central aspect of our human experience. As we walk this path, may we carry Anselm's call to reflect the divine in our lives, continually seeking a deeper, more authentic engagement with the goodness that shapes our existence. Anselm's vision of morality does not merely hinge upon abstract notions, but extends into the practical realities of everyday life. He challenges us to consider how, as rational beings, our decisions are intertwined with both our understanding of divine principles and our inherent responsibilities to one another. This conversation naturally leads us into the realm of personal ethics, where individual choices are made against the backdrop of Anselmian thought. For Anselm, the call to act ethically arises from an understanding of humanity's relationship with God. This relationship should ideally reflect a commitment to goodness that guides our moral decision-making. Consider the scenario of personal integrity in the workplace, an arena often rife with ethical dilemmas. When faced with choices that test our values, such as the temptation to misrepresent information for personal or corporate gain, Anselm's perspective urges us to evaluate our motivations carefully. Do our actions align with a higher ethical standard, one that echoes Anselm's principles about the intrinsic connection between goodness and the divine? In this light, Anselm's moral philosophy invites introspection on how we define success and the ethical compromises we might be tempted to make. If we regard moral action as a pursuit of goodness grounded in the divine, then adherence to integrity, fairness, and transparency in our dealings becomes not merely a matter of personal ethics, but an embodiment of our relationship with the ultimate good. This viewpoint transforms our daily decisions from mundane choices into reflections of deeper moral commitments. Yet, the implications of Anselm's thought do not solely reside in the realm of personal ethics. They also engage with broader societal questions. In the context of community values and social justice, for example, Anselmian ethics prompts us to interrogate the societal structures that affect human dignity and community welfare. In a world grappling with systemic inequalities and injustices, Anselm's emphasis on the divine nature of goodness challenges us to see moral responsibility as collective rather than purely individualistic. Anselm's notion of goodness requires that we look beyond our personal experiences to connect with others in meaningful ways, advocating for a community ethos that reflects divine love and justice. His philosophy can inspire social movements and community initiatives aimed at uplifting marginalized voices and fostering a culture of empathy and support. When viewed through an Anselmian lens, efforts towards social reform and equitable practices become not just political acts, but moral imperatives that resonate with our duty to embody goodness in all facets of society. The application of Anselm's ideas in addressing systemic injustice further urges us to confront the technologies and systems we build. For instance, the increasing reliance on algorithms and AI in decision-making processes introduces complex ethical implications that need Anselmian scrutiny. As technology permeates social, economic, and political dimensions, the underlying moral principles guiding such innovations become paramount. When we consider Anselm's focus on the nature of goodness, it invites us to reflect on how technological advancements may serve or undermine the dignity of individuals. In the creation of AI-driven solutions, the ethical responsibility to ensure that these technologies promote fairness and respect for human rights becomes a vital concern. Anselm's moral framework would advocate for the prioritization of human dignity over efficiency and profit. His philosophy compels us to engage in a deeper ethical analysis. Are we creating these technologies with a commitment to do good, or are we allowing them to perpetuate existing inequalities? On a more personal level, there are many modern relationships that echo Anselm's focus on goodness in moral interactions. In friendships and family dynamics, we often find ourselves at moral crossroads, where the decisions we make can impact not only our immediate relationships, but also our conceptions of loyalty and love. Anselm's philosophy suggests that our relationships should be grounded in the pursuit of goodness and truth, reflecting the divine nature in how we interact with others. When disagreements arise, we might ask ourselves how Anselm's understanding of the moral obligation to pursue goodness informs our responses. Instead of retreating into self-serving behaviors or resentments, we could strive for reconciliation rooted in a shared commitment to uphold the virtues that reflect the divine. This approach requires both humility and a willingness to engage with discomfort, prompting dialogues that seek understanding rather than division. As we delve into Anselm's impact on interpersonal ethics, we encounter the notion of forgiveness and repentance, which is integral to many moral dilemmas we face in relationships. He positions the act of seeking forgiveness as not merely a personal transaction, but as a recognition of the inherent worth of others and the divine capacity for mercy. This dimension of Anselm's thought invites us to consider what it means to restore relationships, both with others and within oneself. How does the desire for alignment with a higher goodness influence our capacity to forgive or seek forgiveness? The challenge here is to embrace a form of goodness that transcends mere obligation. It becomes a mode of relating to others that aspires towards the ideal of divine compassion. Anselm's perspective can serve to illuminate how, even amidst conflicts, the effort to embody goodness requires a commitment to understanding and loving those around us, a process that can ultimately lead to deeper, more authentic connections. However, the expansive reach of Anselm's philosophy also calls for discernment as we navigate the complexities of our diverse world. Many contemporary thinkers critique the singular notions of goodness posited by Anselm's relationship ethics, suggesting they may not account for the rich tapestry of human experience that influences moral reasoning. This critique has led to nuanced explorations of ethics that embrace varying conceptions of good rooted in cultural and experiential diversity. Figures like Judith Butler and Martha Nussbaum advocate for more inclusive moral frameworks that emphasize relational ethics, where the capacity to respond to the lived experiences of others shapes our moral decisions. Anselm challenges us to reflect on these critiques by considering how subjective interpretations of goodness can coexist with a divine understanding of ethical duties. This tension creates fertile ground for further exploration. How does one remain committed to a divine standard of goodness while being open to the plurality of moral experiences in human interactions? As we transpire through these contexts, Anselm's moral philosophy encourages a contemplative engagement with our ethical responsibilities, both at the personal level and the societal level. The quest for goodness, as informed by Anselm's thoughts, compels us to strive toward a cohesive pursuit of moral action that harmonizes the divine with our daily interactions. Ultimately, it prompts profound introspection about how our beliefs intersect with our choices and how these choices impact the fabric of community and society. In the face of ongoing global crises, be they humanitarian, environmental, or social, Anselm's insights push us toward a sense of moral urgency. The call to goodness is not merely theoretical, it implores us to act. The ethical dilemmas we encounter today challenge us to embody Anselmian principles of goodness in concrete ways, promoting the flourishing of humanity and the stewardship of creation as we navigate our ethical landscapes. As we reflect on how Anselm's moral philosophy resonates in our lives, we might contemplate the big questions he raises. What does it mean to pursue goodness in a world fraught with complexity? How do we maintain our commitment to an ethical framework grounded in an understanding of the divine, even as we engage with diverse moral perspectives? These inquiries invite us to continually engage with Anselm's insights, pondering how our aspirations for goodness shape our interactions and the broader society in which we live. In conclusion, Anselm of Canterbury's moral philosophy, with its profound connections to divine goodness, offers an enduring exploration of moral inquiry that transcends time and context. His thoughts pave the way for both personal reflection and societal engagement, compelling us to consider the ramifications of our values and ethics in all facets of life. As we navigate our ethical landscapes, let us carry forward Anselm's vision, seeking to embody the goodness reflective of a higher moral calling in our choices and actions, not merely for ourselves, but for the collective society that shares in this divine endeavor of reflecting moral truth in the world around us.
Midnight rails under silver moon, dusty boots on a winding road. A shadow's the only friend I've known since she packed up and let me go. Empty whiskey bottle on the seat, her laugh still echoes in my bones. The saddle's heavy with memories. I ride alone where the wind still blows. Nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be. Nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be. Sunrise paints the horizon gold, but it don't warm a lonesome soul. Every town I pass feels half her size. Every trail's haunted by goodbye. I whisper prayers to open skies, hoping someday my heart'll find a brand new path beyond the pain, where broken hearts can heal in time. Nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be. Nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be. Nowhere else to be. to be, nowhere else to be. Nowhere else to be, nowhere else to be.